Another Médecins Sans Frontières hospital has been leveled by airstrikes, this time in Yemen. It comes just 3 weeks after the shocking US airstrikes on an MSF hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan. That one killed at least 23 people. Yemen has fast become the forgotten war, but every so often one victim's story goes viral and the world focuses again. That's what 6-year-old Fareed Shawki's story recently did. Many people have seen that video of that 6-year-old boy begging doctors, "Don't bury me," before he then died of his wounds. His house had been hit by an airstrike. More than 5,000 people at least have been killed since this unfathomable war started in Yemen in March. And I've been speaking to MSF Dr. Natalie Roberts about the dangerous situation and her very dangerous war zone work. And of course, about the unacceptable toll that it's taking on innocent civilians. Dr. Roberts, welcome to the program.
Hi.
It is extraordinary for us to see yet another hospital in yet another country being hit, an MSF hospital. What is MSF saying about this? Are they calling for an investigation? Are they calling it a war crime like you all did about the Kunduz hospital?
It's very early to say the situation here in Yemen because it only happened overnight, last night, in a context of a really very complicated, difficult war. I mean, the war in Yemen has been going on since March. And we've seen since March civilian facilities being targeted, hospitals, schools, markets. So yes, this time it's an MSF hospital that was hit. I know that we gave the coordinates. I worked in this hospital over the summer, and I know that we were giving the coordinates very regularly to the Saudi-led coalition.
And looking back, there we see very clearly the MSF sign. You can see in our big picture in the wall, so all the world can see that this was, a clearly labeled and clearly marked facility. How many people were inside? Miraculously, apparently, there were no casualties.
Yeah, miraculously, it does seem there were no casualties. I think there were at least 12 staff members inside and a few patients. It happened overnight. It's a hospital in a very dangerous area, so we'd always tried not to keep too many patients in that hospital overnight anyway. We'd always been quite aware that the hospital had sustained damage before from airstrikes in the vicinity.
What were you seeing when you were there in terms of the injuries that they were sustaining?
About half the patients we were seeing that came into the hospitals in emergency were injured patients from airstrikes, from war-wounded patients. So some of them would be quite horrific injuries, limb and trunk injuries, sustained by usually pieces of shrapnel. So you'd see some horrible wounds, sometimes some head injuries. Even small children. I saw one boy with an injury to his eye. He got a piece of shrapnel in his eye and ended up losing it. So it's just really quite barbaric injuries.
This is almost the forgotten war. It's so complex. People don't know who's on whose side. What do you need, and does MSF at least have the wherewithal, the medicines, the surgical equipment, the logistics that they need to carry out their medical mission?
We've been managing up until now to get it into the country, but then it's not always so easy to get those medicines to where they need to go. We're quite subject to whoever's in control on the ground. For example, in Taiz in the south of Yemen, at the moment we don't have permission from the Houthi rebels there to bring our medicines into Taiz.
We hear from UNICEF that some 39 medical hospitals, missions, treatment centers have been hit during this war since it started in March. We hear also of massive shortages, everything from medicines to food, water, electricity, fuel. Paint a picture of the life for ordinary people there as far as you could see it when you were there.
The life is just really horrific for these people, particularly places where the hospital was hit right in the far north in the mountains. It's very difficult for people to get around in that place anyway. They're terrified. There are people living in caves. They're sheltering away from their towns and away from their villages. If someone gets sick or a woman needs to have a baby or someone gets injured, they really try not to move on the roads because they're so afraid of being caught in an airstrike. So it's such a complicated feeling for them because they're incredibly stressed. They need help, but it's so difficult for them to go and access any help.
And it almost seems medieval, foraging for fuel, whether it be roots and wood and food and the like. Apparently, in some instances, just 1 hour of electricity every 5 days.
In that part of Yemen, right in the north, there was no electricity the whole time I was there. So months of no electricity.
UNICEF says that some 10 million children are in need of basic sustenance and that a huge number are at risk of malnutrition.
Malnutrition has been a problem in Yemen for a long time, even before this conflict. But now with the impact of the conflict, the fact that food cannot move around on the roads, that markets are bombed, even if the food arrives in the town, people can't go and get it. And then very little food is moving through the country. Means that really there's a huge lack of food and food security.
It is extraordinary when you look around the world, whether it's in Afghanistan or Yemen, other war-torn places, even the crisis of Ebola in West Africa. MSF seems to be the linchpin of survival, the difference between life and death for so many people in these forgotten, God-forsaken situations. How do you feel about the job that you're doing?
It's really in our remit of MSF to be in these places. If we're not there, then who else is going to be there?
Dr. Natalie Roberts, MSF, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, as you heard, MSF believes the Saudi Air Force was responsible for hitting their hospital in Yemen, but the Saudi-led coalition has just sent out a statement denying conducting airstrikes in the vicinity of that clinic.